privately or to each other. How would you respond to Randy?
Well, you know, I would say that Randy and I probably have a fair amount in common. If you looked at us walking down the street, you wouldn't think we were Indian. You wouldn't think that we were Native American. I've gone most of my life passing as white. Didn't think about it. Redskins wasn't an issue to me when I was a kid. My dad was 3/4 Indian, and he turned us away, my particular family, away from the tribal culture. So yeah, it wasn't an issue. But I'm the leader of a tribe now, and I have people in my tribe who are 100% Indian.
And what are they saying about this?
They feel uncomfortable in mainstream society. Mainstream society doesn't recognize people who are different and feel uncomfortable walking into a room of white people. But people who are different and walk into a room of white people, people in power, and are ignored, they're minimized. And it happens every single day. So sure, I could go through life not thinking about it. But I'm forced to think about it every day. And we're dealing with the effects of the history of our tribe being removed every day.
Reverend Hagler, the USA Today piece that was done, and you were featured in it, and you were saying that you have, from the pulpit, you have preached and you have joined Harjo and others here at this table, and you have even had members of your church tell you to cool it. I mean, they've got the burgundy and gold and the Redskin logo on their cars. They hear you preach about 10 or 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, they're going to the games. And it's hail to the Redskins all the way. And you got a lot of I guess you're getting some blowback by it. So here's my question to you. You will listen to the show, and inevitably we're going to get calls from black people, African Americans. There's no big deal, and Congresswoman Norton spoke to this rather eloquently. So what would you say to this audience on Urban View?
Well, let me say this, because one of the things that's true is that I've won the debate in the church.
You won it.
I've won the debate.
Because you're the minister.
Well, no, because one of the things that happens, and I think you're absolutely right, Congresswoman, is that there's a part where people are disconnected from history. And the history is usually something that somebody else has fed to them, which is very often full of myth. Right? And so when you begin to break down the history to people, and particularly the black folks in my congregation, all of a sudden the light goes on. And that people all of a sudden have to take a new viewpoint. Yeah, I got folks who maybe have the flag and all that other type of stuff, but now they're talking about, I love the team, but I hate the name. Right? So people are beginning to make that disconnect and feeling that it is synonymous with the N-word. One of the things that we made a decision is that we are not going to use the N-word anywhere within the confines of the church. I ain't got no control of what people do on the parking lot, but nothing within the confines of the church. Cannot use it, right? Because it's synonymous with the N-word. Because we got to remember that one thing that happened historically, always, right, ever since almost time began, when somebody wants to dehumanize somebody else, they call them outside their name. Like in Vietnam, folks we call them gooks, right? We go into the Middle East, and all of a sudden they're sand niggers, right? And the military is using that to dehumanize people so that you can do anything under the sun that you choose to do to them. And the fact is that we exist in a culture, and I think for black folks, where we have been wrestling with the ability historically to name ourselves, to claim our history, and to own our own narrative. Because often, and too often, the culture has tried to tell our narrative to us, tell us what hurts us and what doesn't hurt us, and also try to define us. Right? I heard Rush Limbaugh not too long ago on the radio saying, I'm not going to refer to them as African Americans or black any longer, they're Negroes. Right? Well, what gives him the right to try to define who I am? Only I can define who I am. And that's really what's at stake here. This is a universal issue of race and racism and the ability to control our own narrative.
Henry Louis Gates has an excellent PBS special, and I'll get him out. And it was this week, actually. And I always talk about the connection, and a lot of times I'll get African Americans who will call Randy and say, well, why should we worry, Jeff, about Native Americans? Look at what is going on with African Americans in this country. But Henry Louis Gates made a very interesting point and speaks to this history, that he talks about the invention of the cotton gin. by Eli Whitney, and how cotton became king. They needed more land, and so in order to, and the most fertile land was from Georgia to Texas. The only problem was that there were Native Americans who were on that land, and lo and behold, we have the Trail of Tears, the removal of Native Americans, and that the second largest movement of slaves outside the Atlantic slave voyages was the actual slaves from the northern states, most northern southern states, to the south. There's a direct connection, is there not, between African Americans and Native Americans when you talk about the history.
Sure. Sure. I mean, that's...
All right, we're going to do something here because we're going to switch some of the panelists out. But before I'm going to do this to each panel, will the name be changed? And how long do you think it will take for it to happen? So I'm going to start with ESPN. Kevin Blackstone, what's your sense?
Well, I think the Trademark Commission should decide again sometime next year, 2014, and I'm under the belief that you are, Congressman, that history shows that, and the law has stated since the Lanham Act was passed in 1946, that there is no reason that this name should remain trademarked.
Butch McAdams, WOLB.
Absolutely, I think the name will change. I think maybe within 5 or 10 years. But I think this is a tremendous start. I mean, certainly the protests work, but if you've got major media, not just the local media, but you've got national media refusing to use the term, then that's a tremendous start.
Mike Wise of the Washington Post.
Joe, 3 to 5 years, I believe, and I think I've never seen more of an assault on a brand from different locations and varying angles. Between the trademark patent, between the Oneida Nation, there is an organization and there's a conviction now that I've seen on many different fronts. And I think, I don't even think this is an economic issue. It's a fear of losing money eventually. But I think the NFL will be embarrassed into change if they keep up their tact.
Jeff, what do you think as chairman of the Fort Sill's Apache tribe?
Well, I was convinced by Congresswoman Norton's description of the trademark case. It sounds like it could change courts. That's often how Native people have had to receive change through the court system.
And Congresswoman Norton, you've obviously impressed this panel here. Yeah.
This is really beginning with the leadership of the pros who close to this, but they're old media. This has begun to move, and as much as I believe in the law, as much as I have seen that African Americans have, frankly, got nowhere without the law, I must say, Roger Goodell, what are you there for? This is where leadership is required. And he begins to see the handwriting on the wall because he has begun to move away from it, at least in what he said to the media. And yet, we find that Snyder clings to his position even as he writes us all a love letter. I would love it if you had on this occasion, the team to find some way to squirm out of the position they have taken. And frankly, the only way I can see it can happen is if Roger Goodell plays the role that it is his obligation to play and brings, he's already seen the Oneida Nation, was it today? He obviously sees Snyder anytime he wants to. His next move should be to bring them both into the same room for a real discussion.
Kevin Gover, National Director of National Museum of American Indians.
I think I agree with Mike Wise. I think it's 5 to 10 years. I think a critical event will be success in the trademark suit that Suzanne Harjo has inspired. The Kansas City Star is already doing that.
Wow.
I think more and more newspapers in major cities will sign on, and they will do it because there is a strong Native American presence in places like San Francisco, Denver, Minneapolis, Phoenix, Los Angeles, and those communities will begin to be heard from. And we may see a whole new legal strategy challenging the use of hate speech in a publicly financed facility. And I think there's a civil rights public accommodation suit sort of waiting to happen. And it will happen in one of these cities where there is a strong Native population. I forgot to mention New York as well. There are a lot of Indians living in New York. So all these things are just going to snowball, and the other owners are eventually going to have to say, you're costing
So
us
this
money.
becomes an NFL brand problem. I'm going to skip you for a minute, Randy, if you don't mind. But,
That was the point I was going to make about
Jared?
the other owners. I've actually spoken to a handful of owners who are very concerned about this situation moving forward. And to get back to your original question, how long, I'm of the opinion of some of the other panelists that we're talking maybe 5 years, maybe 7 years before this actually happens. Because my understanding with the trademark situation is that even with a defeat, that still would not compel Snyder, would not force Snyder to change the
Although
name.
he would not be protected.
Right, he would not be protected and could not profit.
That's where the money
exactly.
is.
Yeah, no, I understand that totally. I just wanted to make that distinction that that's the next step, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think when you talk about the pressure from the media, the pressure from the public, there's no pressure like the pressure from his peers being the NFL owners.
Mm-hmm.
And there are several of them who are so concerned to the point that I think that they will compel him to really, if not move on it, to continue to explore it and perhaps move eventually on it.
Reverend Haglund.
Well, of course, I believe that it's going to change. I don't know when. I mean, I think the issue is in any struggle, any movement, you just keep the pressure on until it happens, right? And there's a part of the scripture that I remember where it says in Mary's song that we will confound the proud in the imagination of their hearts. And so that's what this struggle will do with those who are arrogant and prideful. Will have to change.
We're a little over time, but Suzanne Harjo,
Well,
President of Morningstar Institute.
we brought our lawsuit in 1992, and that sounds like a really long time ago. Think of this. The Washington team has not gone back to a Super Bowl since we filed suit. They have changed everything. They've changed owners, coaches, players, helmets, uniform, everything. The place where they play, the state where they play. The only thing they haven't changed is the name. You would think that as a matter of luck, they would just have a name change contest and get some spirit back into the team.
We'll take a on that. Let's take a break. We're going to switch some.